Get started here. Hello and welcome everybody to Writers Morning Out, a free gathering of writers of any genre, of any level, sponsored by the North Carolina Writers Network. I'm Penny Cottrell, the regional rep, along with Tracy, for the Central Piedmont region. Two quick announcements before we start our slush pile event today. The North Carolina Writers Network Spring Conference is next Saturday, the 18th at UNC Greensboro, and the deadline for that registration is Monday by 4 p.m. When I get a chance here, I'll put it into the chat for us, the link for that. And then next month for Writers Morning Out, we are reading the book The Girls We Sent Away by local author Megan Church. I'll also put in the link for that. That event will be on Saturday, May 16th. I just finished this 2 days ago, and it will be one of those books that just sticks with you. So highly recommend. She's a local author. She'll be here to speak with us next month. So I hope you'll be able to join us for that. Welcome to our slush pile. My apologies, I'm getting over a cold, but we have Tracy Crow and Ty Stumpf here with us today as our panelists. We are so grateful to you two for always showing up to give us such constructive feedback. Tracy is a former Marine Corps officer. She's a literary agent and the president and publisher of Millspeak Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the creative writing endeavors from within the military community through writing workshops and a traditional publishing pathway for books authored by military veterans and their family members. She is a former assistant professor of journalism and creative writing and the author and editor of 6 books, to include her award-winning memoir, Eyes Right, Confessions from a Woman Marine, and the historical biography with co-author Jerry Bell, It's My Country Too, Women's Military Stories and from the American Revolution to Afghanistan, earning a starred review from Library Journal. In addition to her role as an online MFA adjunct at Southern New Hampshire University, Tracy teaches in the low residency MFA program at Queen's University in Charlotte. Currently, as a work-for-hire author, she is writing her first historical biography of women in the Air Force, Special Forces from 1990 to 2022, scheduled for release in 2027 from Air University Press. She lives in North Carolina on 10 Storybook acres with her husband, a Major League Baseball lifer, and their 3 pups, Rocky, Hope, and Fenway. Ty Stumpf lives in Sanford, North Carolina, and is the Dean of Arts and STEM at Central Carolina Community College. Ty earned his BA in English from Catawba College and his MA in English and Creative Writing from North Carolina State University. The author of the chapbook Suburban Burn, his work has appeared in Passages North, Nashville Review, Harper Pallet, and other journals. Ty and his wife Bianca have a son named Jude and a daughter named Cora. Thank you both so much for being here today. Does anybody have any questions before we get started? Are we good? Okay, these did come in order of receipt. I think I accepted 13 in all. There were some that I had to reject because they didn't meet the guidelines. But we'll get to what we can today. And otherwise, listen anyway. I think a lot of writers share a lot of little common tics and tricks, and Tracy and Ty are always so good about pointing those out to us and giving helpful feedback. So without further ado, unless Tracy or Ty has anything to say. Yeah.
Could you just very quickly go over what the premise of all this is so that those
Sure.
who may be joining us for the first time? Okay.
Yes, thank you, Tracy. So you're submitting a piece of work, the first 300 words or 1 page, and the editor or agent it's 5 o'clock on a Friday. They're tired. They've read dozens and dozens of, the clock is ticking. And they want to get out of there. So how can you get those first 300 words to grab them? That's our premise of today. Did I miss anything else, Tracy?
Nope.
Okay.
I just thought it might be helpful for some. Okay.
Yes. Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Is everybody able to see that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I can see most of you, but wave me down if something happens. I will do my best to read this clearly. Yes.
Are we doing noisemakers?
Yes. Let's do noisemakers. Tracy, you've got your noisemaker. Ty, you have yours.
My noisemaker never works, people, ever. I'll shout a profanity or something, I guess.
Okay. I'll do my best to listen for those.
Okay.
Yeah, and they'll use the noisemakers, at which point they would stop reading if they were to receive this at 5 p.m. on a Friday. Okay, our first piece is called A Mother's Legacy. It's creative nonfiction. The gentle voice on the phone conveyed a sense of urgency. Mr. Field, I'm the day nurse at Clover Manor. Your mother hasn't been well this week. This morning she was found unconscious. We haven't been able to rouse her. If you want to be with her, you should come now. Do my brothers know? Yes, David, as her emergency contact, was called first. I left a message for Stuart with his wife. She said he was at work. Silence, then with a sigh. Well, I'll be there. I just can't say when, as it's a 5-hour drive, counting from when we get on the road. No problem. After visiting hours, there's a bell by the main entrance. Someone will let you in. Thank you. The portable phone slipped from my hand, clattered on the granite counter, then fell to the floor. Numb, I ignored its off hook. Beep, beep, beep. The calm in my voice, with the nurse belied the paralyzing panic I felt inside. For months I had dreaded this call, and now that it had come, I was still unprepared. My mother, 94, had almost slipped away from us before, yet I didn't feel ready to let her go. She was the rock I needed to get through the tough times. But now she needed me. There was no question that I would go to her bedside. My wife, standing on the other side of the counter, had heard half the conversation and filled in the gaps. It's fortunate, in a way, that the car is almost packed. I'll finish putting stuff in the cooler. If my mother was the immovable object in my life, then my wife was the unstoppable force. 3 hours later, I merged onto the Mass Pike. Traffic was heavy but flowing. Typical for, and that was the end of the 300 words.
We got to the end of the page.
We did.
That means we're going to flip the page. Do you want to go back out of sharing so that we can see everybody?
Sure.
Or leave it that way. I mean, I don't care. I just wondered. It's kind of weird.
That might be. There we go.
2 or 3 people.
Mm-hmm.
Ty, did you want to start?
I'll dive in. Yeah, a couple things about this. One, I was interested in where this goes, even though I have a decent feeling I know at least the next thing that's going to happen is based upon the setup I have in front of me. So I found that part interesting and notable. I'm also assuming that there's going to be some filler. Excuse me. Let's try again. Just some backfill, so I understand the mother's relationship as well too. I've got a couple little places I would give a couple notes, but I'm going to pull back for a second and see what Tracy has to say, and then I'll jump into those.
Oh, okay. One of the things that I've heard editors actually ask for at conferences are more stories built around relationships. I mean, pretty much they all are, but they especially love the parent-child relationship stories and the husband-wife relationship stories. And one of the things, just to throw this in, that they say that they hardly ever see that they would like to see are more stories with work relationships. They say they don't see those. So anyway, this whole thing about dynamics is so rich with where it can take us, right? With all kinds of levels and layers of conflict. So with that said, I definitely would have flipped the page. But there were some things that very early on concerned me. And this was from a mechanical standpoint with creative nonfiction. So if you're okay, I'll just point out a couple of those just to, maybe I'm off my marker, which, is probably true, as crazy as I've been lately. So one of the things that I wanted to mention is that sometimes readers of nonfiction begin to feel suspicious when there's an awful lot of dialogue, word for word, line for line, from someone other than the actual narrator or the very person, like a wife or somebody very close to them, which means that it would have been with such emotion that they would have remembered it. But even though this moment might have been extremely memorable, just keep in mind that a lot of times the dialogue could actually be summarized from characters who are maybe not going to play a significant role. Now, maybe this person at the nurse plays well, but just keep that in mind that very early on, we're adding a lot of dialogue right there on that main page that's from someone that's not part of the family. And so that kind of makes the reader go, this really happened? How are you remembering all of that? It's just one of those little things that readers start to question. Take a look at that line, yes, David, because it almost makes it sound like the nurse is actually talking to the narrator, calling him David, as opposed, it's just a matter of maybe create a sentence like yes, period. You
Same thing
know?
happened to me, Tracy. I'll jump in right there and
Okay.
say, it took me a minute. I had to go back, which I don't think is
Yeah,
what you want this early.
exactly. On that first page, you want your agent or editor to feel as if they can sit back and they're in the hands of a master storyteller. There aren't a lot of glitches, questions. Everything is just like fitting together, fitting together, fitting together. And that's what makes them want to turn that page and keep going. So there are a few things that I felt like we're almost getting ahead of the story, and we're already filling in with a lot of flashback. So I just want to bring that up, and I also want to talk about the car already being packed. So my question was, as an agent and publisher, were they already planning to go there, or were they actually planning and packed to go elsewhere? Because that's a dynamic, that's, and it could have been slipped in, packed for Disney World, now is going to be someplace else. But the questions about having trouble letting her go, as a reader, the reader's going to think, but you live 5 hours away. Mm-hmm. And so that also comes into it. So kind of keep in mind, I mean, all these are real, all these are true facts. And none of this is like, oh, what were you thinking kind of thing. It's just the setup for it. That's what I'm trying to get the writer to understand. It's all about the setup. And sometimes as the writer, especially of nonfiction, because we know the story so well, we're not even quite aware of all the questions we're actually putting in the way because we know it so well. So we think it comes across clearly. So sometimes it helps to hear a reader say, well, okay, I'm confused about this. So maybe you want to move that to someplace else, So again, not referring to anything judgment-wise. I'm just saying it's about the setup of the details as they fall onto the page, one tripping after another. Does that make sense?
Okay. I'm with you on that. I'm going to jump into a couple little things. A suggestion just to look at on the page. I wonder about pulling the entire first paragraph. And so it starts with the question, do my brothers know? And then jumping in. I'm not going to stand by that 100%, but I think it's worth a read that way. I think it moves us into the moment a little bit more, and then we have to piece together a little bit more what's happened. And I'm comfy with that. One other one I'll mention, I would suggest striking the line, the calm of my voice with the nurse belied the paralyzing panic I felt inside. I would argue you can trust the rest of your words to say it already. The action of the phone dropping, the next verb you have, I had dreaded this call. I think that does it for you already. Like we get it in that way. And then, Tracy, I have a question for you. I go back and forth on this one. Immovable object and unstoppable force, I tend to think of those as a negative connotation, but I've been banging my head around about that if I'm quote unquote right about that or not. What do you think out of curiosity? Does that feel more negative or am I maybe overthinking that one?
I'm thinking that the mother comes across a little bit more negative and the wife comes across a little bit more positive in this case. I kind of like the attempt. I'm not quite sure the words are perfect yet, but I liked the intent of showing these two different forces within the narrator's life. That part I did like, but I kept wrestling with like, are those exactly the right words?
I've thought about that for a while. So I'll throw that back at the writer to think a little bit more about if this continues that idea of those two folks into the future this way. Cool. If, however, this was a transition for before our next paragraph begins, maybe play with that a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it also does hint at maybe some type of conflict there. If the mother's basically unconscious right now, but yet she's this immovable force, but yet she's about to move on, then what kind of level of conflict are we about to walk into, that sort of thing too. But just be thinking about the things that we're mentioning. I mean, all of this is very workable, very, very workable. I will say, I mean, I know where Ty is going with that. Do my brothers know? But I have this thing about not starting with dialogue because there's no context. And so when there's no context, this is something I learned from best-selling writer, author Dennis Lehane many, many years ago. And he's been proven wrong 100 times. And my students love to show me where he's been proven wrong, where I'm proven wrong when I say, don't start something with dialogue. So, and in this case, this probably would be a good line to start something because it doesn't need to have a whole lot of context there. But in most cases, the reason you wouldn't want to start with dialogue is because the writer has no context for it and therefore needs to go back once the writer does and reread the thing. Otherwise, the dialogue's forgotten.
Sure. Yep.
An exception might be the word yelling fire. Mm-hmm. Something like that is pretty much okay. I'm there with you. And like I said, in this case, this one might work, but just keep that in mind as a rule. Really think about how much context is this reader really needing, and then am I really going to be making the reader go back and read all this again? Okay.
All right, thank you so much. I will share their screen again for the second one. Is everyone able to see that? Yep. Okay.
Yes.
This is a work of fiction. Eddie Hennington sat at his usual table in the Pamplona Cafe on a rainy Saturday afternoon, sipping a regular coffee and poring over Bright Star by John Keats. He looked up from his poetry book to see a familiar pair of Boston University students, Claire and her friend Eleanor, chatting at a table across the room. He waved to them. "Hi, Claire. Hi, Eleanor." The girls turned their heads to face him. Claire smiled. "Oh, hi, Eddie. Still reading that poetry book? Didn't anyone tell you? Classes are over until September." The two girls giggled and continued their conversation. Eddie blushed and tried to resume his reading. He'd just completed his sophomore year at MIT and considered romantic English poetry entertaining fare after a grueling semester getting in credits towards a degree in astrophysics. A couple of MIT classmates, a lean blonde named Gerald Collins and his shorter, dark-haired friend, Jake Bloomberg, came into the cafe, sauntered over to Eddie's table, and sat down. "Hey, Goober, what are you reading?" Gerald asked as he pushed the table or as he pushed the top of the book in Eddie's hands, presumably to read the spine. "Poetry? What kind of good old Southern boy spends his Saturday afternoon reading poetry?" Taking the cue from his friend, Jake said, "Yeah, Dr. Thornton would blow a gasket if he knew his star physics student was wasting his time on that bullshit. Hey, we got an extra ticket to see the Red Sox play Toronto tomorrow. Interested?" Eddie squirmed in his seat, brought his shoulders together, and hunched his back. "I don't reckon I can afford a ticket to a baseball game." "Ah, Goober, live a little. We're going to the Rats later for a beer. Why don't you come along?" "I don't drink beer," Eddie mumbled.
So again, we made it to the end of the line, end of the page. Yay! Do you want me to go ahead and start with this one?
Sure.
Okay. This is really shaping up kind of interesting, with lots of dynamics. I can kind of get a sense for where it may be going, but one of the things that I really admire is that I feel pretty grounded in time and place. And that's one of the things I look for as an agent or editor, like where am I grounded? Do I know where I am? General time, place, that sort of thing. Because a lot of emerging writers forget how important that is to really, really ground the reader. So I felt about that. I could see kind of, where they are in a sense in my mind. There's enough left out that allows me to use my imagination, which I kind of liked. There's some little mechanics that would have given me some trouble right early on. Things like, it's toward, not towards. Towards with the S is the British version, so just keep that in mind. I see it all the time. But little mechanical things like presumably to read the spine, he does do that. So instead of saying presumably, we would just, let him push the spine, look, that sort of thing. So little tiny mechanics, get rid of exclamation points. We just, allow the words and the tone and the position of people to actually do that for you. Again, unless you're screaming fire. But, I would have liked to have gone another couple of pages at least to have seen where this was going to take me. I think there's a little bit of the internal that may be missing that would have made this a little richer. So we're getting a lot of the external of what's going on, but I'm not really getting a whole lot of sense of internal of Eddie. And I think that would make it a little bit more interesting and real and rich.
I agree with that. I have I go back and forth on the inclusion of Claire and Eleanor. If this is the only time we see them, I might suggest, especially at first here, since they are quick and gone, that we may not need to meet them yet. I get pretty quickly from thereafter about when the other two students come in, what the time frame is roughly in terms of the school year, that kind of thing as well too. So something to consider there. If we come across Claire and Eleanor in some capacity later, I think including them now makes sense in my head there. The only thing I had in particular was there may be a way to just something to think about. If there is, for example, a particular line in Keats's Bright Star, something like that, you want to highlight that he's reading before he's interrupted. It may start to set up what I think is starting to happen here, which is somebody who doesn't quite fit the bill of what we consider to be a typical person. Somebody who is interested in astrophysics but also poetry at the same time, someone who has a kind of southern bent to him, not quite fitting in the Massachusetts Bostonian kind of era. So I think there may be a place there to even grab a line or two you find particularly notable if you feel like it can connect in some way. Just something to kind of put to the side there as you think about where you go from there. So. But I appreciate the setup. I appreciate too that I feel like I know the time frame, even though it hasn't been told to me directly yet. And so that all feels like we are building in the right direction for me. I mean, I think as Tracy and I kind of measure it, when I read page 2 at this point, yes, I would. So I think you've done what you need to do on page 1.
Good. And when I'm saying about being grounded in time and place, by time, I can mean that to be like a year or an era, but also time can also mean the age of the characters. So it gives me a grounding for we've got college students here. So that's in that sense, when I was talking about timing, that's what I mean. So he's right. We don't really know yet kind of like what actual decade this is. It seems like it might be 60s, 70s or something, just because of some of the conversation and some of the words and stuff. But at any rate, keep in mind, but I do like the fact that we know it's a Saturday afternoon. Little details like that are slipping in and setting that stage, and that's really, really rich and helpful. Mm-hmm. But just because we're in a limited third here at this point doesn't mean we can't allow the interior thoughts. Right. Keep that in mind, okay?
All right, thank you. Our next piece.
Oh, and by interior thoughts, I don't mean that it has to be italicized, literal dialogue. I mean, just, basically summarize like, what is he thinking or how is he feeling about them, that sort of thing. Okay, sorry.
Thanks, Tracy. All right, our next piece is fiction. Please, Mr. Shank, go ahead. We'll join you at the cabin. I cannot tell you how grateful we are, Yosel shouted over the music. Looks like we've done each other a favor. After a solemn glance at the coastline, Mr. Shank grasped his bag and turned resolute up the gangway. Yosel negotiated with the purser to board the trunks. Then he pointed his family toward the ship. Finally, their turn to board the America. Yuta bobbed along with the Oompa band, focused on the wooden gangway. About halfway up, Yosel tapped her shoulder and pointed at the coastline. Look at the view! Ah, Yuta said, stopping for a moment. We are with the birds. Anna also gazed out at the afternoon sky, relief and excitement playing across her face. Only Dora scowled as she leaned toward Yosel's ear. What are we doing? How are we going to maintain our secret sharing a cabin with a stranger? It's not how I anticipated this would go, but we must make the best of it. One word from Yuta, and he will immediately know who we are, especially when she calls you Tate instead of Fetter. She is a child, many changes in her life. Who knows? Father? Uncle? Maybe he won't even pay attention. He has plenty of his own problems to think about. And what about Anna, in a room with a strange man? What will Abraham say? Neither you nor Yuta nor Anna will ever be in that room without me if he is there. I will protect you all implicitly. How can you even think otherwise? What would Mudra and Tate say? They would never have allowed this. Desperate times call for desperate measures, Dora. We should have returned to Vilnius. This is a complete mess. Oi, Gewalt.
Great job with those pronunciations.
Trying.
Great job. I think you have a new career coming for, audiobooks. Wow.
Appreciate that.
Ty, did you want to
start? Yeah, I'll start. First of all, overall, I wanted to keep moving forward. And so that's my first measure of the success of the page, obviously. While I feel like that I'm starting to get a understanding of time and place to some degree, I'm comfortable with not having all the details at this point. One place that I was a little concerned, and I will say there was a switch that happened for me on the next line that pulled me back in. So, but I'll go ahead and voice it anyway. I'm always a little concerned when I hear too many names, what I feel to be almost too fast. And it is when I meet only Dora scowled and she leaned toward Yosel's ear, I was like, oh, I'm at 5 names now. While I know it's a family and while I know they're traveling, that's the moment where I start to ask myself who's important. Because I'm guessing I won't need to hold on to all of those 5 names right this moment. They may come and go depending on the length of this piece. But I'll go ahead and kind of flag that for a moment. I tend to be a little bit, I guess the word sensitive, about that. When I start asking myself, who do I need to know? As a side note, this probably goes back to when I first met my wife's family and I met 22 people in the exact same room, the exact same day. It's a bit of a scar. So I now know.
Was there a test? Was there a test at the end of the day?
It was tough. It was tough. But with that said, so I started in my alert went up a little bit, but I will say the next line, what are we doing? How are we going to maintain our secret sharing a cabin with a stranger? I thought if nothing else, the idea of that conflict there and that concern kind of pulled me back in. So I will kind of note that while I was a little on alert, I guess is what I said earlier. At the same time, I understood and there's where the complication begins to some degree for me. So I felt pretty good about that. The only thing I wonder is, would the person say our secret out loud? Literally, quote unquote, would to maintain our secret. So just a thought there about it, or maintain our situation, some word that's a little more vague, perhaps. But with that said, I appreciate where we're going with this, and I'm interested in the kind of conflict that will arise with trying to literally, apparently, hide the truth about things while being around other folks whom you don't wish to be. It's an awkward and odd situation, and I mean that in a positive way. It's an awkward, odd thing, so I think that leads to an interesting kind of potential conflict that we can play with.
Thanks, Ty. For me, my first thought was, is this the first page of the book, or am I already introduced to some of these characters and we're picking up, and this is just a page maybe that the writer wanted some feedback on? Of course, you know my thing about not starting with dialogue because see, I have no idea who these characters are. And so once I figure out, then I've got to go back and kind of reread it again. Maybe that's just me. But we'll join you at the cabin. I didn't know if we were talking, woods, ship, what. I'm not fully grounded in time and place. I start to feel a little bit more grounded when I read things like the name of the ship, America, or when I read wooden gangway. That starts to make me feel, say wooden could have been moved up to the first mention of gangway, and then I would have been a little grounded earlier instead of having to wait another paragraph to get there. So, little things like that. I would have continued, but I would have had some concerns. But let me tell you why. I would have had some concerns because, first of all, the dialogue, as I mentioned. Second of all, this feels extremely thin. There's a tremendous opportunity here to really build a story with some details. For example, like, where are they? Are they walking behind the others? Are they just standing somewhere? I don't know. I mean, I know that they're supposed to be, bobbling up the wooden gangway, but they're talking, and I don't know. Does that make sense? I'm not quite clear imagery wise of where everybody is and what's happening. I get a sense that they wouldn't let Yude out of their sight, but at the same time, I'm not really sure where all the players are right here. So kind of along the same lines of what Ty was talking, they're talking about these things out loud. Should they have been whispering? She have pulled him aside? Should there be other senses? See, there's not a lot of senses stuff. There isn't a lot of sensory language going on here that I feel like makes it deeper, richer, and more layered. So, if we had some more sounds, if we had some smells, if we had, if it's a ship, then we should be smelling some things, right? We should be hearing the seagulls or something, that sort of thing. So and the other people. So kind of keep that in mind. I mean, I do love how dialogue just keeps going, and the writer is astute enough not to have to include dialogue tags after every single one of them, which shows a level of sophistication that would have definitely gotten my attention immediately. but I feel like there's some missed opportunities, like it's a little too thin on the details. And just certain ones placed here and there would have created a more rich and vibrant scene for me to have really gotten into this. So I just toss that out. That makes sense, Ty?
I'm with you on that. Yeah, and as I'm thinking about the details in particular, obviously, these details can help us better understand the situation overall. What details tend to pop up are the ones that will dictate to us. Like, for example, if you're on a ship and you're nervous about what your future is going to be, you're going to notice a different smell, for example, or you're going to notice a different visual. And if they are worried about being caught, who are they looking for? Are these people who are official, wearing uniforms, those kind of things? Are they more worried about being turned in by some of the other passengers as well too? So literally everybody's a version of an enemy. So yeah, I think there's a little bit of time here to take some extra beats to let us into their brains a little bit more, at least kind of behind their eyes. What are they literally seeing, especially if they're on high alert? And I appreciate even the notion of how do you deal with a child who may say the quote-unquote wrong thing. I'm good with not knowing her age at this point. I assume as we move forward I will, because I feel differently about a child who's 12 or 13 versus one who's 4 or 5, especially in terms of their trustworthiness to keep something quiet.
Agree. And I'll just offer one more thing. I feel like we've seen part of this before. And I feel like in an earlier version of it, like maybe they were in a carriage or something like that, we might have actually cautioned the writer about too many details. Like maybe it was too overloaded, if I remember. And so I feel like this is too thin. So maybe we would encourage the writer to go back and try to find that happy middle. Like go pick one of your favorite books and open it up and find, this passage of exposition and dialogue and all this, and see what is worth maybe modeling, just to get that feel for the just right amount of placement of details. So I feel like we kind of came down maybe last time, like, so much that I'm having to remember all this on page 1. And this time it's a little too thin where I don't really know enough. I don't really know how anybody's dressed. I don't really know anything. So this one's a little too thin on the details. I hope that helps.
And I will confess too, I'm reading this as though this is the first I know of it.
Yeah.
So my comments about names, for example, may be less appropriate if we're 40 pages into a longer work. So do take that notion there with a grain of salt, dear writer.
Well, if I'm remembering it, they were getting in a carriage and they were having to leave and they were taking off, and it was all that drama too. And it was rich with, you could feel the conflict, but it was almost too overloaded with the language. That didn't like pull back enough to kind of like let it all happen. And in this case, I think it goes the opposite. So.
And this is why Tracy's a very good editor, because she can remember what we read from 6 months ago.
Not always. You've done that before when I've been like, really? Last time, I think you were the one that did that. One other quick thing, and this is just on a technical thing. Watch where the placement of dialogue goes. So, for example, hold on. If Yosel taps on her shoulder and points out at the coastline, if he's the one that says, look at the view, you can keep that look at the view in that same paragraph immediately after coastline. That's a more sophisticated way of revealing dialogue, because for the reader, it would almost appear as if someone else is jumping in and saying to him. So because it's a whole break in a paragraph. So move that dialogue back up there, so that you don't have to. And so, for example, if only Dora scowled and she leaned toward Yosel's ear, what are we doing? Move that up to follow she leaned toward Yosel's ear, because that's her dialogue. So it can continue in that same paragraph. Those are little things that show an agent editor sophistication of technique. Okay. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Let's see. Our next one is a work of fiction, Buddha's Last Minutes. The pork was tainted. I knew that even as I lifted it to my mouth. I know it now from the fire in my gut and the weakness spreading throughout my body. This rising river of death. The villager's face shone with love as he offered me a meal, kneeling in the dust before me. I had no idea he was putting poison in my alms bowl. He did not know his vital role. I took the meat. Lying here on my right side, I am cooled by a sal tree's benevolent shade. My hearing has started to dim, and the keening crowd before me is fading from view. But somewhere on the wind comes a heavenly fragrance. I can smell sandalwood and myrrh burning beyond the trees. My followers are performing one last act of devotion, preparing a pyre. I have spent so much of this life, its 8 decades, under trees. I never knew my mother, Queen Mahamaya, but I know she birthed me standing in a grove, gripping a branch above her, servants gathered in an anxious, reverent circle around her. 7 days later, she died.
Well, I can jump in and start.
Yes. Go ahead.
As a quick side note, I have two Boston Terriers. If you hear somebody snoring in the background for the record, I literally, she just got very loud for a second. I got very conscious of it. So anyway, a couple of things I'll mention. First of all, because it's a piece of fiction, I'll tackle it as such. So I'm going to assume I don't have to be constrained by a historical fact and things like that. So I'm going to acknowledge that as I move forward here. I thought the first two lines I found them interesting. Like I wanted to read a little bit more because obviously the immediate complication of something being wrong and yet you taking it anyway pushes me directly into the okay, so why? I'm already interested in the potential setup here, and I want to know more about who this character is to kind of push along with that. I also liked further down a line that kind of stuck with me to some degree. I have spent so much of this life, it's 8 decades, under trees. I just thought that was a nice one as well too. I found it interesting. It's a slightly different perspective than what I was used to, and it does tap into some of my associations when I think about some of the other things that have been written in the piece earlier. I appreciate the detail, sandalwood, myrrh, pyre being built. I thought the visuals of this so far were ones I found interesting. And I did feel like I was, as Tracy kind of alluded to in another piece there, I felt like I was getting an understanding of a place. And it felt different than my own place. And that generally can be an attractive thing as well too. So even though we're talking about somebody who's not well, I found this to be an interesting setup for knowing more about this individual. I'll go ahead and mention one other thing. My assumption, and I could be wrong, we'll see. If we're going to tell me about somebody on death's door, and other folks know about it as well too, and you've alluded to this person being roughly in their 80s, I assume we're going to go back in time at some point to tell me more about how we got here. An assumption I have. Up to you if that is the case or not, but I will confess to you my bias moving forward is that some of that's going to pop up.
Okay. I was really impressed with a lot of the sensory language and details. I mean, that was nice to have, like Ty's already mentioned, the smells and things like that. And the tree's benevolent shade. I mean, I could feel the coolness as soon as I read that. But here was my thing. I was like, okay, is this flash fiction? Is this the first page of something? That's where this kind of format kind of messes me up a little bit because I'm not really sure how best to maybe offer some guidance, if any is even needed from me, because I'm not really sure what the preferred outcome is for the piece, whether it's flashed and done, or whether it's the opening page for a longer piece, short story. I just don't know. So I'll say this, that the pieces that I liked. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to say was this really made me realize I know a lot about Buddha's early life and nothing about the end of his life, which made me want to go search for it. And I just ran out of time. I especially love the line with the mother, but I know she birthed me standing in a grove, gripping a branch above her, servants gathered in an ancient, reverent circle around her. That is incredibly masterful writing right there. Incredibly masterful. Very, very, very powerful. So I'm not really sure what the role is for the piece and where the writer wants to take this piece. I would just say at this point, just to keep going and take what we're telling you for whatever you can glean from it. there's a lot of really interesting details that are happening in here. I just don't know where we go from here after he dies. I mean, I don't know. So, but that part right there, I really, really want to compliment the writer. That is masterful. Well done.
I put a check mark next to that one as well too. I will confess that. Yeah, I did read this as being part of a longer piece. I will confess, if this was it in its entirety, some of my feedback would be a little bit different. So
Yeah.
let me confess my bias there of assuming we were moving forward from here. So
Yeah, one other thing that I also want to mention, and I don't think I had to in the others, but I think we have to in some coming up. And that is whenever we all, and I've mentioned this in prior slush piles before, and I'm seeing this frequently. Whenever we're already in past tense, the pork was tainted. And then the villager's face shone with love as he offered it to me. We'll see in the first lines, he's already been offered it. And so anytime we back up again, to an action prior to what we've already presented, we have to use that past perfect, I think it is, form of the verb. And I don't know why, but so many writers are forgetting either that or they've just been beaten, like, don't use this, but you have to if you're going to go back another step in past. So if we're already in past, then we have to use the past perfect to go deeper in the past. Does that make sense? So it would be this rising river of death. The villager's face had shone with love. You see how that now takes me back to previously of handing it to him? So just, and we don't even have to say as he'd offered me meal, as he offered me the meal, kneeling in the dust. He had no idea, see, or he had no idea, but at least we've already grounded the reader in the knowledge that now this is the moment after, this is the moment that came before I now realize the meat was tainted. So just remember that past perfect actually plays an important role if you're already in past tense and you have to show a previous version of past. Okay? Did anybody get some kind of rule or remember a rule that they've just been beaten into about really? Even if you've got to go back into a previous version of the past? Okay. Louise.
Well, I was just going to say the rule that I edit by and have learned is that if you're in the past tense and you need to go back further, that first line is in the past perfect. And then after that, it can stay just in the past. But you have to anchor the reader in that new past.
Thank you. And I don't know why I am constantly correcting this with my SNU students, Queen students, emerging, when I see work that comes in from authors wanting publications, what's happened here? Because it's so prevalent now, I hardly ever see it correctly done on new work. So I'm thinking that maybe there's been some kind of rule that I missed somewhere. Okay, thank you, Louise. All right. Keep going, whatever this is. I'm really curious. I love that one line especially.
Okay, is everyone able to see this?
Not yet.
Okay, not yet?
Not yet.
How about now?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Flash fiction. This one's called Unsettled. I met my friend Jackson at the edge of some woods that backed up to his property. Samson, his jet black standard poodle, was off leash standing next to him. When I spoke with Jackson's son, Teddy, earlier that morning, he said his dad sounded agitated and confused and would appreciate me stopping by to check on him. I said I would. Jackson Spaulding retired a few years ago from the same state college where I currently teach creative writing. He reminded me of my father, not in looks, but in character. As a former ag professor, he understood science and the pulse of the earth, exhibiting deep appreciation and humility for both. What's up? Everything okay? Listen, I'm sorry Teddy asked you to come all the way out here. I think he thinks I need babysitting while he's away. Oh, listen, man, no worries at all, really. Good excuse to see you and Samson. So, what's going on? Jackson said he had to show me. So the three of us picked our way slowly through the pines, tulip poplars, and heavy understory to Jackson's backyard. The thick woods emptied into a clearing of leaf litter patched with crab and onion grass. It's right over here, what I want to show you, behind the garage. At the far corner of the backyard stood a detached single-car garage, sided with the same vertical cedar planking used on his modular house. Jackson walked toward a small manhole protruding from a concrete dome. It sat equidistant from the garage and the edge of the dense woods that bordered the back of his property. He paused a few yards in front of the manhole, and stuck out his right arm in front of me, signaling me to stop. When I was a boy, Siddhartha, the young prince, I sat under a rose apple tree during the plowing festival. I was alone, silent. The breath in my body calmed me. That was my first taste of equanimity, and I felt the promise.
So that actually went with this piece.
Hmm.
Okay, I got confused when I got there. I wasn't sure.
Same thing.
Hmm.
I assumed it was from the other piece.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
yes.
just okay.
Oh,
I see a comment popping up that says
Oh,
that
I did
last
too.
paragraph.
Maybe I had a copy and paste. My bad. So signaling
I,
me to stop would be the end. My
I read it.
apologies.
I read it as separate. I will confess to it. So yes.
I love the rose apple tree. I like the comment. Okay, okay. So thanks because when you read that I thought, oh wait a minute, I crossed that out thinking it was like accidentally pasted in somehow.
I did too.
Okay. All right, Ty, did you want to
Yeah,
start?
I'll jump in with a couple things. First of
Okay.
all, the setup of this, I find that we were talking about relationships before. I found it to be interesting, potential one to play around with. It feels like we have a slightly younger colleague visiting an older one who we're concerned about in some capacity. So I get that part of it decently well. In terms of, I appreciated the details that came up here and there. I'm going to suggest a couple places to take a little more advantage of that potentially. Jackson Spalding retired a few years ago from the same state college. Name it. Tell me which state college, because now I know a place a little bit better, and it's a quick, obvious way for me to know that information. Also, I tend to tell people where I work by name, so I would refer to it in that capacity as well too. The Samson, the poodle, I appreciate the little detail there, and that he sticks with us past just the one reference earlier on. And I'm a little interested to see what's coming up here. It feels to me a little bit like potential bomb shelter kind of setup or something like that. And maybe I'm incorrect there, but I'll go ahead and confess to you. I assume the place that we're walking into is going to become the attraction and interest that we're going to be talking about overall. So, only thing I'll mention is I liked the reference to Jackson having understanding the pulse of the earth, exhibiting deep appreciation, that kind of thing. I appreciate that detail. You like to think that people get into what they do because of a connection to it. And even just a quick mention of that lets me know a nice bit about Jackson, but also tells me a little about the connection between these two guys. That you know that about your colleague when they are not in your direct field of what you do suggests that you've had some interesting conversations and that you can see that about somebody or told that directly. Either way, I think that's a nice detail that says a little extra about the connection between those two guys without being a telling connection. You just showed it to me. I appreciate that.
Yeah, there are lots of those little details that are slipped in that on first read we might just kind of like read over them, but when you go back and analyze them, you realize you're picking up little um, details on a deeper level that are getting into your psyche and building a story. Like one of the earliest ones is about Samson off leash standing next to him, that you have a dog so well trained or loyal or whatever that he's able to stand there in the woods off leash tells you already something, so little details like that, and that this writer even thinks to include those tells me, right away as an agent or editor, this is pretty masterful here. I'm going to keep going. And I would have definitely turned the page. I would have also said, I've got a few little concerns, but they were fairly little. While some of those details are great, I noticed that we should have used that past perfect tense again. So when I'd spoken with Jackson's son Teddy earlier that morning, he had said his dad sounded agitated, confused, and would appreciate me stopping by. I don't think we need the next line. I said I would because he's already there. Little things like that, would also hint at me that this writer could even just tweak it up a little bit more, be a little bit more conscious of those techniques. When I feel like a little bit of missed opportunity, I met my friend Jackson at the edge of the woods. If there would have been something about his friend physically that maybe he might have noticed, looking the same, because remember, he's going there mildly suspicious because the son has asked him to show up. And so something along the lines, and he seemed to look like he always had, and, wearing his, typical overalls or something. I felt like that could have been just maybe slightly one extra little detail, a little richer there to help us ground. And then Jackson Spalding had retired a few years before in the same state college. That's really nice. Let's see. I like the lines. So the three of us picked our way. I liked that language. You're picking your way. One of the things that I mentioned is a little bit more on the sensory details from the beginning, because I don't know what time of year it is. And I know we're meeting out in the woods, but I get the sense as we get down, when I read the thick woods, that makes me feel like, okay, trees are full, probably maybe summer, because, when you say thick woods, it tends to mean, that, as opposed to thinner, at least in my neck of the woods here, literally. You don't go down to my woods this time, or, in another month or so, because you'll find too many snakes. But at any rate, just try to remember to keep the reader a little bit grounded, a little bit more of that place, whether it's the season, the time of year, one little thing. I mean, like, was he hot? Was he sweaty? He's meeting him out there at the woods and he wants to go for a walk. Maybe it's like 90 degrees out here. Anything that you can add that would just help to fill in a little bit. But the tension is working. There's the curiosity, the layering of some of this is working. And I like the fact that he says that he had to show, he had to show me. So, and then it's right over here what I want to show you behind the garage. I mean, all of this was like, where is this going? Is this like some kind of horror thing or what? So very curious. So a lot of goods going on.
I'm going to note one very small thing that Tracy said, and I did it on my paper. I met my friend Jackson at the edge of some woods. Mm-hmm. Tracy said the, and I wrote the as well too. I'm going to argue that it should be the woods. They're specific. It's not some general one. We know exactly where we are. And I will point out, it seems to me that if you meet somebody at woods that back up to their property, I'm guessing here you're a neighbor of some version. Perhaps not. But anyway, just a real small thing, but I noticed it. So I thought I'd throw it out, especially since it's the first line.
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Oops. Hold on. That's not the right one.
Oh, and by the way, cedar planking, nice detail. It's like on the side of his modular house. Those little tiny details slipped in there, which are, helping me form an image, form a picture. So it helps.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is everyone able to see this?
Yes.
All right. This next piece is fiction. It's titled Mother. Mother left me with two things when she died, her wedding ring and her ghost. I wear the wedding ring on my right pinky finger. She always complained I had a man's hands. As for her ghost, she sits perched atop my shoulder to watch and comment on my every move. We, Mother and I, lived all my life in Vivian, Louisiana, a town nestled in the northwest corner of the state's boot shape, between the Texas and Arkansas borders. I wear her ghost like a large overcoat. Vivian's heat and humidity are enough to boil the crawdads living in Black Bayou Lake, and the only reason I could see for an overcoat, apart from a handful of days in deep January, is to keep the insects from eating you alive. Mother's voice hums in my ear like a swarm of mosquitoes. They say certain people attract mosquitoes more than others. For me, no amount of repellent will make the mosquitoes go away. I attracted Mother's ghost. No amount of ghost repellent will make her go away. Mosquitoes leave quarter-sized welts across my legs and arms and itch for weeks after. So do Mother's biting comments. The ring, a small gold band with a chip of diamond, sits lodged between the two knuckles of my finger. I'd like to resize it, but Mother's voice hums in my ear.
I like a chip of diamond. I'm going to start weirdly further down. So for just a second, but it was a nice detail that I felt addressed a couple of things without telling me directly about Mother and the situation that she was in at some point. So I'll mention that as one that just kind of I hung onto after I finished reading it. I always appreciate when I read people's pieces and there's a bit of an image or something like that that I can still remember afterwards and hold on to. So I'll mention that. I appreciate the setup of the wedding ring and also the other thing being the ghost, something I think we can argue fairly easily enough. So it is tactile and very obvious. It's something, of course, that is much more dramatic and striking in some way. And what goes with that? I go back and forth on the line of I wear her ghost like a large overcoat, only because I've been told also that she kind of sits on the shoulder as well too. I'm trying to play around with those visuals, and I'm not quite there yet. I'm good with the on the shoulder idea. That makes sense to me. The overcoat, I think I understand what the what the writer's going for here as well too, but I don't know if those two images work together for me the way that you want them to. And as we kind of move forward with here, I'm going to be interested, of course, with what this means. Does the mother continue to still talk to her? These biting comments we've mentioned, for example, like how much of a player is the mother's ghost in this? Is it literally the memory, the haunting thereof, and those kind of things, or is it literally something that we will hear from her and that she will dictate to some degree the action moving forward? That's my kind of question mark as we move forward with this.
Okay, thanks, Ty.
Hmm.
If this had been creative nonfiction, I would have been a little bit more comfortable as an agent editor flipping the page and going on, because it has that feel of how an essayistic memoir piece would happen with mother and child. But as fiction, I have real concerns, and I kept thinking, do I toot the whistle or not? And I thought, well, I'll just keep going. But let me express why. Fiction is handled slightly differently in that before we get to the bottom of page one, it's called the page one rule in the industry, we need to have some sense of a want, a need, or a desire by the protagonist. And I mean, maybe we're to infer that the protagonist would like this ghost of a mother to go away, but there's nothing really concrete in that. So I kept waiting for the action. I'm being told details, but I'm not being driven into the story. There's nothing that's moving me forward in a narrative. I hope that makes sense. With nonfiction, you get a little bit more elasticity there because you're examining something. That's the whole point of nonfiction. It's essayistic at times. You're holding something up to the light and you're examining it from all different facets. But with fiction, we need a narrative thread that's moving us forward into a story, into a plot. And I'm not moving. I'm just being told some stuff, details, but I'm not moving forward. Does that make sense to everybody? And so I think there's some bones here, and no pun intended with the ghost, but I would say I don't think we have the opening yet if this is fiction. But I think we have something that we're working on, and that's something that could lead to something perhaps interesting, but I'm not there yet because I don't have a narrative thread that's pulling me into the story. So that's my chief concern about it. Had it been nonfiction, okay, I've got some other little mechanical things, but I can let go of the need for a solid narrative thread for another half a page or so if I get there very quickly. But in fiction, I got to have a narrative thread. I got to know that. Why are you telling me this now? That's one of the questions that people will ask, is like, why this story? Why now? And who is the narrator talking to? Why even bring these details up? I hope that makes sense.
I will confess to the masses here. When I've written fiction, I've found that my first page generally is going to get tossed. I'm sorry, my cuckoo clock is going off now. So it's just all noises. It's snoring dogs. It's cuckoo clocks. So at least I kept the cats out. But one of the things I've discovered about me personally is that my first page is me getting warmed up to some degree. And then my second page generally tends to be sort of where I was supposed to start. I go back and forth. That's the case with this. I will suggest, however, maybe start with that last paragraph and start there and just see where that shape begins. And this may not be the right advice, but hold on to that stuff beforehand and see if it can come somewhere else instead, or at least the setup thereof.
Maybe ask yourself, dear writer, what is the story about?
Hmm.
And ultimately, what is the plot? And then how do I get into the plot? Like now, I mean, how do I get into it? Because we're not set up yet to even have a plot. Mm-hmm. So just ask, like, what is the plot of this? What is going to be the first action? And how do I get into it? How do I find it? My way into that. Okay. Is that snoring?
That was her. That was her. She's 12 pounds, by the way.
That sounds like my daughter's French bulldog. God, they're so loud.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I got 2 of them, by the way, so it's just extra. Anyway, so yeah. Insane.
It's always the little dogs that make the biggest noise.
It's true.
Those little pushed up noses.
Yep.
All right. The next piece is of poetry. Profiles in Haiku, Baba Amte. The seeds of my subcontinental wonder were planted in the obituary page of The Economist. Decades earlier, I read the story of Baba Amte, an Indian lawyer and activist. Walking home, he stumbled over a pile of rags and refuse in the gutter, realizing, suddenly, that it was a man dying of leprosy. Disgusted and afraid of the sores, he ran, and then returned. First stars, stepping off the bus, in an unknown place. He returned, saying to himself, an action done in fear has no love. He took him home and cared for him until he passed. Lost on my journey, a stranger greets me. Together with his wife, they purchased a desolate tract of land in Maharashtra, tiger-infested as the story goes, and cleared the forest and built shelters. They determined to create a new home for those afflicted with leprosy. As in India at the time, such people were viewed as contagious and helplessly dependent. Untreated, the disease can cause disfigurement and take fingers, limbs, sight. The goal of this new community was self-sufficiency, so that leprous and disabled people could live happily, safely, and with purpose. Her smile, she looks up from sorting rice, with a thin metal blade. They named this place Anandwan, Grove of Joy, and today it is home to several thousand. A dream achieved. Everyone contributes as they can. There is farming, craftwork, a hospital, and more. They welcome guests with a bed and a communal meal. A guest can wander the village, where they might find Baba Amte's grave marker, and there read these words from William Blake. I sought my soul I could not see. I sought my God eluded me. I sought my brother, I found all 3.
I'll confess, for me, this is a little bit harder one to give some feedback to. I enjoy and appreciate folks who bend the rules to some degree, and by rules you can put that in quotes, of course, where we meld poetry with fiction, or even with nonfiction for that matter, to kind of elevate and magnify both of them. One of the first things I have to confess in reading this is I have to make a decision: does this go on, or am I done? I felt like this was more of a finished piece. So my feedback in this kind of way is the assumption that I'm looking at all of it. I kind of feel like it felt like an ending to it, so I will give it that note there as well too. Blake's words in particular felt good as a concluding statement there. I think one of the things that hits me the entire time too is my desire to then go look stuff up to decide if this is true or not, because then because I want to react to it differently accordingly based upon that. So those are the kind of pushes and pulls that I kind of feel as I read a piece like this: is how should I look at it? How true should I take it to be? And what the author wants me to do with it once I kind of make those decisions and kind of come to some sort of consensus on the questions that I have there. That's what happens to me when I first read to this kind of piece, is I get a lot more questions. I'll make a couple of answers. One of them is, if you want me to believe it to be true, and it is in fact true, you may find a way to simply note some version of an epilogue or something like that, some sort of note early on that lets me know birth and death dates, for example. As soon as I read that, I will confess my biases to assume the person with whom we are focused on is a real individual who exists at some point. Yeah, okay, I'm going to stop there because I'm still spinning around a little bit about what else to say, quite frankly. So,
No, very good comments, and I agree with everything that you're saying. That sometimes it's hard when we're trying to provide some feedback when it would change if we thought this was finished or if we realized it was going to continue, and yet our guidelines say the first page. So it could be that in the future, Penny, Kai, what we may need to look at is asking our contributors to let us know if that page that they're turning in is actually the finished version of it, because it's flash or it's a poem that's supposed to be like finished, as opposed to the first page of something, because that would really help us know how to provide the right kind of guidance. I think going right into it knowing that this is the end, or if you're wanting to continue on here. So I'm going to assume for a moment, I mean, I went both ways, like this is it, and if it's it, then the first line really throws me, because the seeds of my subcontinental wander were planted in the obituary page. Okay, so that is about a narrator who is writing this. So then I'm expecting that narrator to show back up somewhere to tell me how he's been affected or she's been affected by this. In other words, other than just relaying the facts of the story of this man affected by the leper and creating this colony, which is wonderful. But what does that mean to the narrator? Why is the narrator telling me this story in this way and now? And so part of me felt like, okay, this must not be a finished piece, because I'm trying to figure out how this narrator fits into this. Why not just tell me a story about this man? Like, decades ago, Baba Amti, and, while walking home, stumbled over a pile of rags and refuse. And see what I mean? I don't need that.
Tracy, I'm going to interrupt you because you unlocked it for me a little bit better. So thank you. That's it. That's what I didn't verbalize and was only feeling but not saying out loud. Yes, there is. This is a story about a person who is not the narrator. I can read the haiku as being the narrator coming in. For example, trying to trace the steps, thus the bus, those kinds of things as well too. But yes, that's what's catching me up to some degree. Yeah. The narrator moved away pretty quickly, and I have to decide where she has gone. And if he or she is coming back for the sake of the haiku, I respect that, but I'll need that set up earlier in some capacity. Thank you. You've unlocked you've unlocked the way I was going to talk about it.
Good. Yeah, because when I got to the end, I was expecting the narrator to show back up. Mm-hmm. You're like, okay, so what did you do as a result? Okay, you've given us this story, but so how does this relate to you? And okay, you wandered, you were curious, but so did you go there? Did you visit that colony? That's what I was hungry for, but I didn't know if it was finished or not. So just it might help us if we knew that, so we would help, and we might be able to provide a little bit more steady guidance there. So just keep in mind that if it's not about the narrator, then you can cut that line and just give us a story and factor in the haiku, which is really clever and really interesting. I feel like it got a little bit so factual, that larger paragraph at the bottom of that page. It just gets into it's like the language totally changes. So I'm up there with all this sensory stuff, and I'm with two haikus, and then all of a sudden I get all the facts, and it just took me a totally different tone. And I wanted to stay in that tone because that was like, kind of like musical and sensory. And then I'm into this untreated. The disease can cause disfigurement. It's like I'm reading something out of Wikipedia all of a sudden. So it just kind of, the shocking tone difference, was a little grating. So keep that in mind. And, I think like when he says he took him home, I would encourage you to look for ways to humanize it even more. He took the leper home and cared for him until he passed, little things like that, because he took him home. It starts to get like, with all the he's, he returned saying to himself, and then he took him home and cared for him until he passed. It starts to get a little, like who's on first and who's on and what's on second. So try to always humanize rather than use so many pronouns. Try to use the actual nouns as often as possible. Okay, does that help? That makes sense? Yes. Oh, and by the way, I'm sure the section from William Blake is probably in public domain by now, but you would be surprised at how many publishing companies have actually purchased rights for another 100 years or whatever. So keep in mind, we can't use things like song lyrics or other lines from other people that's not in the public domain unless we have paid for permission. I mean, I found that out when I was using something 100 years old that some company in England, some lawyer had ended up buying the rights. The song Morning Has Broken?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wanted to use one stanza because it was like 100 and some years old. Well, guess what? That lawyer's office in England bought it like 75 years ago and nobody even knew about it. I had to pay $300 and some to use it. So, I mean, fortunately, my publisher had insisted I go do more digging, and the copy editor had discovered, Tracy, it's not in public domain. It used to be in public domain, but it's not anymore. I was like, for crying out loud. So keep that in mind. Just when you think something's old enough that it should definitely be public domain, it might not be.
Fair.
Thanks, Tracy. And I do want to be mindful of everybody's time. It is 2:11. I don't know, Tracy and Ty, how much you want to continue. I think we've got about 6 pieces left.
I figured it was going till 3, but that's up
okay.
to you. I don't know
Okay, that works for me.
Okay, I don't know.
All right. Let's go on to the next one then. All right. This is a piece of fiction called Sasquatch. We felled the beast in the dead of winter. It was so cold we left it where it collapsed, confident that by morning it would be frozen so solid that no creature worth a lick of brains would attempt a meal. In the spring, before the thaw, me and Travis, owner of the Roadkill Cafe, thought it might be worth the trouble of butchering. That is, if it smoked well, and if my lazy, no-good brother-in-law Cletus would lend a hand, or at least his truck. We could dice the critter up and feed it to the beast. That's what Cletus calls the contraption he hauls behind his pickup. It's his own invention, a pair of water troughs welded together. Damn ugly thing, but it could smoke 450 pounds of beef in one session. He's famous for his whole hog barbecues. He'd shoved an apple in the critter's mouth like you see in those Hawaiian parties. Whatcha call 'em? Luau's? Yeah, real fancy like. Thinks it's hilarious. Personally, I think he's got a screw loose, but he's family, and I tolerate him. During the tourist season, he takes leave of the lumber mill and traipses off to the many fairs and barbecues around the state. Good thing he works for his father-in-law. No normal operation would tolerate such shenanigans. Like I said, round these parts, family takes care of family. Even with the chainsaw, it took the better part of 2 days for the butchering, and another day and a half to haul it away. I ain't never seen so large a bear. It was tough, too. We went through 2 blades before we got the pieces down to where we could manhandle it into the pickup.
Thanks. Ty, do you want to go?
Yeah. Okay. I go back with an initial confusion that slowed me down in the reading of it. So let me note that as well too. We felled the beast in the dead of winter. It was so cold, blah, blah, blah. And then later on, we refer to the beast being the barbecue, the ability to barbecue it. So that immediately confused me. I had to decide: is this the same reference from before? Are we using the word beast twice? In which case, that confusion sort of slowed me down. So I feel confident, however, that the writer does not want me to have that confusion. So because that becomes problematic moving forward or whatever. So I found the voice of the narrator to be something interesting and worth kind of moving forward with. It's got a detail about it that I find interesting, but doesn't go too far away for me to feel like I have to know more than I already know. I will confess my ignorance when it comes to all things cooking. So I'm good with not having to know a whole lot more than that. So that part works well for me. I am curious about where we go from here. What is the complication we move forward with? What kinds of things? What's page 2 look like? So I'm willing to flip the page, start to find that out. I'm a little uncertain though what I'm going to find on page 2. I don't need to know everything I'm coming across, but in terms of laying some groundwork for me, that may be something to think a little bit more about as well too.
Okay, thanks, Ty. I did not blow my train whistle, but I probably, as an agent on a Friday afternoon, I probably would have stopped after the first paragraph because I was already noticing some things like the mention of beast twice, like I did. And so that right there was confusing. And I thought, well, you're confusing me in the very first paragraph. So, well, I need to feel like I'm in that, sitting back and ready for the master storyteller to lead me through a narrative here. So that kind of threw me. But also the second sentence, look how many times it is used. It was so cold. Is winter what's so cold? Because the it is supposed to modify the noun previous, but it's, so it was so cold. We left it where it collapsed, confident that by morning it would be so frozen. So this is what I mean by all these pronouns. Try to stick with as many concrete nouns as possible, and try to make sure whenever you are using pronouns that you really do mean for them to modify, the previous noun and the way that it's all coming across. Because as you can see, it can get like up and down, like what we're going here, what we mean. We felled the beast in the dead of winter. That was a great opening line. Okay. That had me, and I was like, okay, here we go. This is like, okay. And then I'm feeling like, okay, something's going to happen here as a result, like maybe you weren't supposed to do that, something. And then we get into barbecue. So I was a little bit felt a little slightly bit set up for like this big dramatic thing. And then we go into a barbecue. So keep that in mind. I think, as my note down here says, when we get to find out that it's actually a bear, I think the writer needs to decide which one of those beasts is going to be the bear. So in other words, we felled the bear in the dead of winter, or the contraption that gets hauled around the smoker is going to have to be called something else, because one of those is going to have to go, because it's just too confusing there. And then when I got down to the end, I was like, okay, where are we going with this? What's driving the narrative? I mean, it's we've got a want, need, or desire here, but what is actually driving the narrative? Other than they've cut up everything. So where do we go from here? So those are our, my first impressions anyway. Love that opening line, but then it really got a little cumbersome from there for me. Watch those pronouns.
True. I will note.
And I do like the voice. I do like this folksy, me and Jim, or whatever his name was. Oh, by the way, there is a Roadkill Cafe on your way to Key West. I guess it's still there. Maybe it's still there. I got out one time. My ex-husband took a picture of me in front of the sign because it's like, we got to get a picture of this. So that brought up some memory that was funny. Go ahead, Ty. What?
I was just saying, I will confess, the title being Sasquatch, I mean, when you say Sasquatch and then Beast, I immediately think that this is where we're going.
Yeah.
So, it's going to be quote unquote mythical to some degree. I mean, but we can still be very down to earth in our mythology. So I did have that assumption going in. So, but yes, it quickly, I became a little bit confused as we move forward with the kind of references there. So,
with the bear, with the bear.
Yes, exactly. What's became the bear now? And I will confess, using it a few times, I thought was going to be the setup for stringing me along, giving me a little bit of drama and drum roll before you reveal the creature to some degree. But that wasn't the case, so could just mention that in passing too.
Yeah. Okay. And it's interesting that the narrator spends so much of this first page talking about a character who's not even there. Mm-hmm. Which, okay, so somehow that's going to have to factor in somewhere, but I just thought it was interesting. I'm just making an observation.
Absolutely.
Okay. Our next piece is creative nonfiction at Hammond Hill. In July 1994, my 75-year-old mother, Rose, was riding a bicycle in the driveway of her childhood home. Every time that she pushed down one of the pedals, her foot came within inches of the ground, and the bike wobbled back and forth. I held my breath. Could she save herself if she started to fall? She wasn't concerned. She'd ridden bikes all her life. She climbed up on the bike because she wanted to go along with other members of our family on a ride through Hammond Hill, a small group of summer homes outside of Providence, Rhode Island. We were visiting Rose's sister Anne and brother Sim at the large gray house built in 1919 that Anne had inherited. Sim came off the porch. Though he was 81, he was lean and tall, with close-cropped gray hair, wearing khaki work clothes. He strode toward his younger sister with such speed that I thought he would pull her off by force if he had to. "Get off this minute!" Rose continued to make a large circle in the driveway. In spite of her age, she was well-muscled and strong, and her riding was getting steadier. "Get off that bike," he commanded. Rose headed down the driveway. He lowered his head like a bull thinking of charging. "You're too old for this." Rose slowed down. The bike tipped forward to one side, and she got off. She walked it near the house, propped it up, and started to walk away. Sim strode quickly past her and stood in front of her. She stared at him, standing tall and not stepping back. Her lips tightened to a thin line. "Come on in for a drink." He turned toward the house. Without saying a word, she followed.
I can jump in first this time. If that's okay with you, Ty.
Yeah, sure.
I always love these, stories with relationships, where you see the dynamics. I mean, there's that thing I was talking about in the beginning. I think on this one, because I'm not really sure, of course, what's coming next, this is being told in the voice of a narrator who is watching all of this, the child of the mother Rose. And so there are times when we're actually getting the story a little bit out of place and we're not getting any reaction from a narrator whose uncle basically is charging her mother. So I would just say, kind of keep that in mind. Does it need to be in this voice of the narrator? I mean, it's nonfiction, but we're not seeing any kind of reaction from the daughter. I mean, if an uncle was charging my mother on a bike, I would be like, hey, what's going on here? Kind of thing. So we don't see any of that, and that threw me just a little bit. But what I mean by getting ahead of things is that I thought he would pull her off by force if he had to. She already knows the story. She already knows whether he did or he didn't. So you see what I'm saying? So you got to watch those little things when you're telling a story and having it unfold for us, but you already know it. You got to watch where you are and the language that you're using. So it could be something like he strode toward my mom, right? With such speed, I thought he was about to pull her off. Instead of if he had to, or, in other words, we need to see where that narrator is and coming back in. And also, was this an annual thing of the bike riding up through the neighborhood, or was this one time just completely out of the blue that she decided this time she was going to ride bikes if she had been riding bikes most of her life? So I just felt like this is going somewhere, and I feel like there's some rich material here and some dynamic between a brother and sister. So I would say keep going with this, but I feel like I'm not really seeing the narrator. Remember, in nonfiction, the narrator is really the story. So for creative nonfiction, it's oftentimes we either have too much of a narrator on the page or we don't have enough of the narrator on the page. And in this case, I don't see the narrator showing back up other than through her eyes or his eyes talking about that it's his mother or her mother on a bike. So just some little things to keep in mind. I think this could be really good, but I would just work it. And instead of saying we visited Rose's sister, it's his mother, right? So we were visiting, her sister Anne and brother Sim, right? Why keep calling her Rose if it's the mother, in other words? Okay.
Yeah, I will jump in and say, including more with the narrator, or either narrator has to be there more, or absolutely not at all in this case. And it's up to the writer either way. The easiest one is to pull the my, and then all of a sudden it becomes not about the narrator at all, and that's fine. If the narrator is going to come in, though, the plus about that for us as readers is we start to understand this relationship a little bit more. For example, is the brother really dangerous with his kind of command, or is this the way things always work? Is this the normal older brother routine, looking out for the younger sister? Although in this case, of course, they're all not terribly young at all. So either way, I'm good with. But that if you do insert that narrator, it does give us another point that we can look to understand this relationship better. And I think there's a good question under here that Tracy's alluding to as well too, is what makes this special? Like this exact moment special? Because at the end of the day, nobody got hurt, nothing dramatic happened. I can take from this, however, a couple things about both of these folks that maybe can propel me into the future. I get that Rose is somewhat physically fit, but also not terribly averse to a little bit of danger. In the grand scheme of things, she is taking a risk, at least based upon age and all that kind of fun stuff. Same thing with him as well, too, that the older brother is still concerned about what his very grown-up sister does, says something about their relationship as well, too. So I can get some things from that. And if that's what we're going towards, if this story continues where Rose is a little more bold, perhaps, doesn't listen like she should, has to do things that seem not only unsafe, but perhaps unwise, or maybe bold. I mean, it sort of depends on her as to which way it goes. So I can see how those pieces can be laid out there. But if literally it's the family's going to take this bike ride, and I need to know this older woman would still do these kinds of things, I appreciate that, but I'm looking for a bigger reason why too. So those are my kind of responses there and all of that. But yeah, I agree that there either is more or absolutely no narrator in this piece and kind of how it works overall. So yeah, that's what I have for that one. So.
Yeah, and I kept wondering, like, well, where is the narrator? Is the narrator on a bike, waiting, and maybe kind of holding his or her breath as mom's trying to get her, pedaling legs back? Once you've learned to ride a bike, you never forget kind of thing, but you're waiting and watching like, uh-oh, and maybe grateful that the uncle strode toward. I mean, I don't know because I don't know enough. There were too many special details that were probably left out. So like how many family members? I mean, all of these things, like, are they all in a driveway, watching her and everybody's like cheering or like, oh, everybody's collectively gasping. And then the uncle's had enough, and so it's like, that's it. And he calls the shots, he's the patriarch or so. So these are the kinds of things that we're offering that we feel like are still missing, but there's something really here.
All right.
I'm gathering it's summer. But I don't know that. Yeah, summer homes, small group, but it's summer homes, but we don't know if it's actually summertime, I don't think. So little things like that.
Okay.
And what was Anne's reaction? We get the brother's reaction. We don't have anything from Anne, but yet, she's brought up. So just saying, keep going with this.
All right. Thank you. Our next piece is fiction. It's called Ursula and the Architect. Hertfordshire, England, 1928. I created a scandal at my first Saturday to Monday, a posh affair at Lord Henley's country house. Mother planned this informal coming out like a blueprint, every line carefully drawn. That's how important all this social folderol was to her. I'm so sorry, Mummy. I was nervous as a trapped hare. As I smiled, I said my how-do-you-dos and made small talk about the train ride and the weather. Sweat trickled down my ribcage and my lips stuck to my teeth. Dinner was the true initiation. 18 of us buttoned and buckled into our finest attire, arranged like chess pieces around the Henleys' immense table. The gentleman to my left had a skunk-white streak through his brilliantined hair and an oily smile that stretched his lips but never reached his eyes. During the soup, his thigh found mine under the cloth. At first, shock. I shifted. During the fish, it found me again, pressing this time. When I moved, he followed, still talking about his saddle and his dogs, as if we shared a private joke. He gave me an unctuous smile, his outdated mustache pulled over crooked front teeth. Delicious trout, don't you think? I said too brightly, taking a polite sip of the white wine. It's no doubt from Lord Henley's stream. Do you fish? Or are you a fish? A slimy one. Then the hot hand, bold and unmistakable, crept up my thigh. His fingers pressed into my flesh. I froze, my fork hanging mid-air. A blazing flame of anger grabbed me. I set my fork down carefully, drained the last of my glass, and decided. I lifted his wrist high and said loudly enough for the 16 other guests to hear, "Oh, look what I found in my lap." I just realized I was sharing the wrong screen. My apologies. Let me
Oh,
find the right one.
sorry, I
Here we
didn't look
go.
up.
What? There we
I
go.
love
Okay.
that last line. That was great. Talk about
hmm
bold.
Yes, indeed.
Ty, you want to go ahead?
Yep, I will jump in. I appreciate early on. I know the time frame in 1928, so that kind of helps me somewhat set my expectations and what's going on. As I read it through, I found it interesting and worth moving forward with. A couple of details I liked in particular were things like during the fish, it found me again. I thought that was it caught me in a funny way that I got two pieces of information right there together, and it does work with my bias that I assume that when people have multiple courses in their meal, A, they're fancy, but B, I guess it's how you mark time is by whatever piece it is. I liked the somewhat sassiness of our narrator that brings itself becomes bold towards the end of this as well too. And I guess of course one of the things I'm thinking about and wondering. One, I assume that our speaker is maybe Ursula. So since that's the title of the piece itself, but also along with that, I wonder because she's not quite fitting as she's supposed to in some ways. But the way that her inability, or that's not the word I want, her not wanting to fit in completely and obviously is something that we'll kind of move forward with as well too. So I would read second page. The ultimate question as to how this piece moves for me. It moves in a way that I'm willing to move forward.
Yeah. I really like the sassiness too. But I will confess that I really didn't pay attention to Ursula and the architect. So I really wondered if this narrator was male or female. Because nowadays it's like I've learned not to assume anything. So,
100% fair. So I'm with you again.
And I'll tell you the one reason that really, made me kind of wonder was because the 18 of us buttoned and buckled. And so for me, that felt male for some reason. The buckled and even men were buttoned back then. So I kind of went, so just keep that in mind that if this is supposed to be female, which it probably is, then maybe there are a few other little places that can come in that can create that sensory thing that would be helpful for us to know. Because even young men could create scandals for the family. We know that if you watch, the Bridgerton series, that. And all of us, we love Bridgerton, right? So, just kind of keep that in mind. I wasn't really sure. And it could be that this narrator is the architect and not Ursula for all I know. I don't know. But I did love the sassiness and the boldness of lifting the hand because, I can't imagine in that day and age that would have been done. But that's also the surprise that was just rich that I really enjoyed.
A couple other things I'll just mention in passing. I appreciate stuff like the brilliantined hair and all those. The smile that doesn't quite hit the eyes is a nice little detail that puts me on notice, and then that notice I appreciate is rewarded with him being, like a better word, creepy to some degree. Certainly someone who is willing to duck some social norms for the sake of trying to take a shot at something. So I appreciate that as well too. Those details work for me.
Yep.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Our next piece is creative nonfiction. It's called Noah's Ark. As I crossed that invisible but dramatic line into Chinatown, the rain escalated from a drizzle to a monsoon. Within seconds, I was soaked to the skin. In an act of futility, I bought a $3 yellow umbrella from a surprisingly agile 100-year-old Chinese woman who suddenly popped up out of the pavement. Chilled by the rain and wind, I found the nearest subway station and descended into the subterranean heat. There was steam rising from the dozens of people waiting for the train, everyone clearly preoccupied with their own miserable wetness. For once, no one felt compelled to yell at their kids or jostle for position along the track or shout into their phone, telling the person on the other end that the reception in the subway was shitty, like that was somehow news. I boarded the first train that arrived. Behind me, a guy who was both inexplicably dry and seriously stoned. He had a gentle, surprised smile on his face, as if he had just seen the Virgin Mary waving to him from the third rail. And as he stepped on board, he gripped his pants on either side of his penis, not in a lewd way, but as if he felt certain it might fall off if he didn't hold it in place. Swimming slowly through the subway car, he turned his solemn self around and started to sit down in a seat already occupied by a young woman wearing a soggy shirt, the waist of which wouldn't fit around my head. Horrified, she slipped out from under him just in time. Blissfully unaware of her outrage, he sat down with a satisfied sigh, just relieved to take a load off and happy that his penis was still hanging on.
This was fun, you know. Okay, go ahead, Ty.
It's a good reason to be happy. I guess there's that. So it's the little thing. Sorry, I won't do that joke again. A couple of things I'll mention about it. It's an interesting voice, and I appreciate the situation that's going on. It feels light to me in a good way, like I'm moving into something in some looking at things a little bit differently, but in a way that I can take semi-seriously. And I'm good with that. Not everything has to be either weighty or dramatic for it to be a story that's interesting. I, of course, am curious where we go with this story. If it is, for lack of a better way to say it, a drive-by observation, I would wonder why we have it and why we have it. It feels like a kind of notable moment early on. So I'm hoping we continue with this guy to some degree. If not, I would start to ask like why we have him here, other than just simply observing a character in the subway, which feels like something that we can do with some frequency, quite literally. The other thing I will mention too is just one of the things I thought as we move forward, $3 umbrella. Maybe start to wonder what the time frame was, generally speaking. And when the mention was given at some point, folks on their phones in the subway, I was like, got it. I have enough of a time frame. I'm good. We can kind of move forward. So I appreciate that way of kind of time stamping for me that felt very much in the moment and didn't feel like one of those dramatic moments where you have to wheel out a sign to show everybody exactly what time and place it is.
I love that image of the 100-year-old Chinese woman who suddenly popped up out of the pavement. That is so rich. I loved that. I mean, that right there said, okay, this is a narrator with a very keen observation, you know, for detail and humor. And I was like, oh, okay, where are we going with this? This is going to be funny. It's going to be good. I will say that opening phrasing kind of did confuse me. And I thought, why don't I know what this is? As I crossed that invisible but dramatic line in the Chinatown, I was like, okay, I've been to Chinatown in San Francisco. So was there a line there? I guess there really kind of is, but I wasn't sure why the word dramatic. I wasn't sure what that was supposed to mean because I don't have a reference for that. So just know that's probably me. Everybody else probably understands that completely. And exactly like Ty said, I mean, this is really well written. I don't get lost. I'm flowing. There are some great details. We're getting just enough details and sensory stuff. But I don't know what all of this means to the narrator other than just observation at this point. So just keep that in mind that I would be expecting on the next, half a page or something coming in that I'm seeing the narrator affected in some way. Otherwise, I'm wondering why tell this story and why now, right? But there's really some good writing in here. I really like this.
I agree that that's the case, and even the narrator's interpretation of this guy not being basically being harmless. So does require a keen amount of observation from the narrator. So if he's this invested in this harmless, high, slightly clueless individual, I am interested in why that's the case moving forward. So like, what is it about this guy that has really attracted this person, this narrator's attention past just the point of another guy in a subway?
I will say that I got a little bit creeped out when he had a gentle, surprised smile on his face as if he'd seen the Virgin Mary. And I thought, oh my God, he's going to pull out a freaking knife. I mean, that was like, oh, please, no. So then I just kind of relaxed. I was like, let me go back and read that one more time because I really love the Virgin Mary popping in here, like this. This is So, that was nice. That was nice. Thank you. But I did have that freak out moment, like, fudge. This is going to be a slash.
All
Okay,
right.
we down to our, no, we have
Final
two more.
two.
Final
Got
two.
two more. Yep. This one is historical fiction. Um, November 1916. Perfection had been a top priority for Richard since arriving on his due date 10 years earlier. He'd do just about anything for approval. The only thing worse than imperfection to Richard was surprises. That year, Thanksgiving brought him both. If anyone found out what he and the other boy had done in his bedroom, it would ruin their whole family's lives. The Missouri winter chilled Richard's aunts, uncles, and cousins to their bones as they scurried from the driveway to the front door of the Lanes' large Victorian home in St. Charles. As the frozen travelers huddled in the gallant entryway, Richard swooped in to collect their belongings. He peered over the mountain of coats and scarves in his arms to see the guests beeline toward the roaring fireplace in the next room. After a traditional dinner, the men adjusted their belt lines and gathered for cigars in his father's study, while the women joined the children in the front parlor. Richard peeked around the corner of the crown-molded archway and watched his younger cousins play marbles and rounds of jacks. Moving toward the room's periphery, he made eye contact with his older cousin James, who was leaning against a wall across the room. James smiled at him. Richard smiled back. Looking away, he thought, James sure seems more personable than the rest of Father's uptight family. Richard glanced back at James, who was still watching him, smirking. Richard's cheeks burned, and he looked away again. As it was getting late, Richard yawned, his eyelids drooping. Stretching, he saw James crossing the room toward him. He noticed James's nose and cheeks were peppered with acne. The closer James got, the more he smelled like sour milk or acid. Richard coughed.
I'll just jump in a couple of things real quickly. So here are a couple of things that threw me out just a little bit. We get the date that is 1916, and there are no servants. So Richard's got all the coats and stuff. And for a family home like that, typically in 1916, you would have had servants collecting the coats and setting up the meal. So that kind of threw me, and maybe I misread some of that. So that was there. But the biggest thing was that, and I see this happen a lot. If anyone found out what he and the other boy had done in his bedroom, it could ruin their whole family's lives. So now I feel like we've already been given basically a thesis statement. So when I get to the next paragraph, I'm expecting that this part up here has already happened. This has already happened. Now we have a new story down here that he's going to have to try to keep secret. So then I'm wondering, okay, so is this another male relationship he's going to have, or is this the one he's referring to in the first paragraph? And if that's the case, please don't tell us. Take it out. Just you don't need it. I mean, just let the story unfold. This is what I see too often. I mean, if I'm interpreting this correctly, if James is the one that he's hoping the family doesn't ever know about, the other boy, and that was the setup, then don't tell us. Let the whole thing happen. Let the whole thing unfold. Let us see the reactions, all of that. Otherwise, we feel like this is another encounter with a homosexual, innuendos. So it's not his first time. And does that make sense? Oftentimes I'll see like this thesis statement set up, and then they go back or then they go forward or back in time or whatever. And oftentimes they're already given away too much that just doesn't need to be there. That year, Thanksgiving brought him both. Boom. Period. So now we know, okay, surprises in his perfection streak is going to be messed up here. We don't need, let the rest of it unfold. There are two books that do this very well that my new students read, some of them read every term. And that's The Price of Salt, I think it's called, and The Gravity of Us. And one's contemporary and one's a classic. And they're amazing about these types of relationships and all the internal, and then the external fears and what you're trying to pass off and what you may be failing at passing off. I mean, they're both done so incredibly well that my students just go on and on and on about how well both of the authors pulled it off. So just keep those books in mind. If this is what you're writing about, you might find something helpful there in their setup for each one of those novels.
I agree with the particular statement about that last line. I would pull it as well too. I think I understand the inclination to go ahead and make prepare people for when they meet characters to feel that they are somehow I don't know, the aggressor, the one involved. Like basically everyone becomes a suspect to some degree if they fit the right profile for that. I understand where that feeling comes from. But I think in this instance, our discovery of this along with our protagonist is probably the right way to go. I feel pretty good about that overall. The setup is already somewhat there for me to start to be, I think, a little suspicious of this situation anyway. Just the observations about James and about the way he's looking. This with Richard being 10 years old, it feels like the right time for that kind of thing as well too, to start to be an idea. With that in mind too, about his age. I felt like the italicized line, which I then, of course, assumed came directly from his brain, was almost a little too adult for me. Personable doesn't feel like a 10-year-old word.
Right.
Now, if he is somebody who is precocious and has a magnified vocabulary, I get that. I'd probably want to be introduced to that in other places earlier on. Plus, if he's feeling conflicted and feels odd about the situation, it sort of seems that way by his observation, I think perhaps he wouldn't be quite so eloquent is part of it as well too. If you're concerned about somebody or find something puzzling, I think we tend to ratchet down our vocab a little bit. So I will note that as well too. The only other note that I had in particular was I appreciate that the closer James got, the more he smelled like sour milk. I liked that. Like it starts to let me feel differently about it. I went back and forth with the word acid, though. In my brain, I don't know what acid smells like. I know sour milk, absolutely. I'm there 100%, and I think that's quite frankly good enough. It feels timeless in that someone in 1916 and I have smelled that same smell. And it says a good bit about this other character just in that single observation. And of course that I know that Richard's interpreting it as well too. Regardless of what he smells like, that there is something not good about this. I'm good with that. That feels, and also quick side note, I am even more suspicious now of this situation. Having never been told, if that line early been cut, I'm already suspicious. So I think we got the pieces kind of set up here for it. I'm interested how it moves forward. I'm also interested in this, how much older this the cousin is, because that dictates very much how I feel about this situation. If the cousin is a year older, I feel that they are semi-equals, and so this. But if the cousin is notably older, then especially it's going to make me feel like this is predatory. So that difference and knowing that age at some point, the agony suggests that he is probably a little too old for it not to be anything other than predatory. But with that said, knowing that exact age will be necessary, I think, for me, because 10 means something very different to me than 12 and 13 or whatever the case is with the age of that other person.
Yeah, and again, I just think it's really important to establish which story are we telling here, because that if that last line is kept in there about anyone found out what the other boy had done in his bedroom, that I'm thinking that James is somehow going to find the secret out of what Richard has already done and dabbled in or whatever, experimented with, and that's he's going to hold it over his head. Or if James is going to be the one that he does something with in the bedroom that he then has to. So we need to have a little bit more clarity there, one way or the other. I mean, one way or the other. We just need a little bit more clarity. It can go either way, whichever way the right trying to go.
I read it and assumed it is the second one, but that was an assumption on my part, and I was conscious of that assumption. So I will confess that to you, writer, that my everything else about this made it feel like this is the single situation that's being referenced. So
I had to actually go back and put that together because I thought, oh, he's already gotten into something here, and now here comes all these family. And I was like, wait a minute, we don't have a past perfect verb here. So,
she got grammarian on us again. Oh no. So very good. Yeah.
All right. I think this could be really some rich material, but I just not quite sure where we are with who. Okay.
Okay. Our last one is creative nonfiction. It is called The Poem. In 1957, having made it through 5 years of grade school at Our Lady of the Rosary, I learned that I was not worthy. I was a sinner, and missing Sunday Mass, killing someone, or eating a hamburger on Friday would send me straight to hell unless I confessed before I died. I was heading to the door with my fifth grade classmates when Sister Mary Richard grabbed my arm. Stay, she demanded while holding a crumpled sheet of paper that I recognized as a poem prayer I wrote for yesterday's assignment. Where did you get this? What do you mean? Where did you copy this? Tears welled in my eyes as I uttered, I wrote it. Bring all your prayer books to me so I can check, then leave. Though I was only 10, I felt hopeless of my situation. I could not prove I wrote it, and no one, not even my parents, could alter Sister Mary Richard's belief that I plagiarized that poem and lied about it. Over the next 2 years, school life got harder. But then God stepped in to either take pity on me or to set things right. Our village council, looking to raise money for the needy, asked all 3 grade schools to submit a poster with a creative yet appropriate slogan. Sister Mary Richard's pet student, whom she helped to win, didn't. When she asked me into her office, I smiled, seeing my poster leaning against the wall behind her chair, displaying a blue ribbon with the theme, Charity is God's Wish. The realization in her eyes when she said I won said it all, and as they moistened, I got up and left, wondering if God would forgive her, because I sure as hell didn't.
Go ahead.
I'll jump in first. Overall, I creative nonfiction. I appreciate that, and so I take it obviously that there is a truth under this, even if the details are better for the story than perhaps they were perfectly reflecting what took place. With that said, I found it an interesting piece in that the conflict between what is expected of you versus what you do, and especially when something that is created is not recognized, I appreciate. I went back and forth on a couple things, and so I'm going to throw them out there as questions more than statements. One of them is I wondered how knowledgeable a 10-year-old would be about being accused of plagiarism, whether it had to be to some, like, would she think of it as cheating more, for example? It's a small detail perhaps, but I felt like we were in her brain during this time thinking these things through. So it felt more like it was a cheating thing. So I was racking my own brain trying to remember when I first heard the term plagiarism and all of that, and I feel like I was older. With that said, because that also lets me know to some degree like how quickly she flips into being upset about the situation. I understand that questioning them is bothersome, but we know basically this is an oh shit kind of moment. Again, I'll harken back to when I was 10 and I remember cheating one time and getting caught. It took me a little while before I really recognized how not good that was. One other little small detail further down, last sentence right before the end of the page. The realization in her eyes when I said I won and said it all, and they moistened. The eyes we were talking about, if I understand, were the sister's eyes. Did she get upset in that way? Maybe that's what you mean, but I stopped for a moment to wonder about that. Who's teary-eyed? I could see where the narrator is for the kind of victorious moment finally to, sort of show yourself again. Does the sister really feel bad about the situation? So those are my kind of question marks there.
Okay. Lots of nice little details throughout this, but let me have you look at the opening paragraph. There's that thesis statement again. You see, we've got in 1957, having made it through 5 years of grade school at Our Lady of the Rosary, I had learned that I was not worthy. I was a sinner and missing. So we've already gotten this whole thesis statement, right? And so what I would suggest is start off if it's important to establish 1957. I was heading to the door with my fifth grade classmates when Sister Mary Richard grabbed my arm. And then she says, where did you get this? Let that scene unfold and then get into, though I was only 10, I was already learning after only 5 years of grade school that apparently I was not worthy. I was a sinner and if I missed Sunday Mass and ate hamburgers or, whatever. So you see what I'm saying? by putting all that, loading it up front, we've taken away from the drama of the moment of being in that in medias res. In other words, we're like, here's my thesis statement, and now I'm going to tell you how I arrived at that. Okay, so it's just a technique. It's just a matter of moving it just a little bit, massaging it down so that you can start in with the scene of grabbing the child by the arm and like, where did you get this? That is way more like pulling you into the scene, and then say, I was already learning that apparently I was worthless. Does that make sense to everybody? You see what I'm saying? We get into these things where we feel like we got to announce something up front, some sort of thesis thing, and then we got to tell you the story instead of just telling you the story and then filling in the other little pieces along the way, So it's just something that I noticed. I mean, I know this about thesis statement and then telling, thanks to Rebecca McClanahan. If any of you in North Carolina have ever worked with Rebecca McClanahan, who is the she jumped on me one time. Why is everything I'm reading from you a thesis statement and then you tell me, and then it's a thesis statement and then you tell me? Like, I don't know, because that's kind of how I learned. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So, anyways, that's.
I think to some degree, I may be going on a limb here, but I don't feel too bad about this limb. I think that tends to happen a little bit more in creative nonfiction because people feel like we want you to get this. And the other way to be a little aggressive about it, the other side of that is trust your writing and trust your reader. We will get it. I will say that I think it tends to happen more there, and a little bit also in historical fiction as well too. I'm not saying it doesn't happen in other places, but those are two places I tend to find more of it.
Yes. Agreed. I'm judging a contest right now for the East Carolina Literary Magazine, I think it is, or journal, whatever they are. And they sent me their 10 finalists, and I have to choose from those. And I have been really, really impressed. Not once have I seen this like thesis statement kind of convergence. I'm like, wow, I'm really impressed. So it's just a matter of practice, and it's just a matter of somebody noticing it, and then it's like, oh, I can move that down here. I mean, it has to stay in there because it's rich material, especially the whole thing was eating my hamburger on Friday. I mean, God, come on, that is rich. So don't take it out, just massage it, move it around somewhere.
Right.
And I think that's it.
Mm-hmm. Tracy, Ty, thank you so much. Your feedback is always so helpful. And thank you to all the writers who submitted. I know it takes a lot of bravery to put your work out there, and we really appreciate everyone who came today. So thanks, everyone.
Fun reading these. God,
isn't
keep
it?
Going.
We have such a great group. We're so lucky.
You notice we didn't stop with anything, right? We just kept going.
Yes, indeed.
Yep. So many thanks to you. I hope everyone enjoys this stunning spring day, and we'll see you next month.
Okay, bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thanks.